Okay. Hello, and welcome back to Unsolved Histories. Your hosts, as usual, are sponsored by the Ford's Theater Program, featuring our American cousin.
Today on Unsolved Histories, we give you the most mysterious crimes of the last 5 centuries, including the disappearance of Roanoke, the death of Edgar Allan Poe, and the trial of Lizzie Borden.
Each crime will test the likes of Robert E. Lee at his own game to succeed and turn away from this gruesome and mysterious episode that we have in store for you today.
Up first is the miraculous journey told by John White of his journeys from England to the New World, and how he found himself in the middle of a disaster. The disappearance of the Roanoke colony will not only strike fear into the likes of Teddy Roosevelt, but also cause the New Deal to progressively move backwards.
John White, artist, family man, and fearless explorer. Maybe a little too fearless.
Everything was going great. The colony was thriving. We had a beautiful environment. My daughter even gave birth to the first British-born subject on American soil. Unfortunately, some people were complaining that they didn't have enough tools and that they were dying of starvation with their poor tummies. So I was forced to return to England to get supplies and funding. When I got back to England, the whole country was tied up in a war with Spain. It took me a year to gather supplies, support, and a crew to return. Then I was captured by a Spanish ship, and all my supplies were pillaged, forcing me to return to England. By the time I finally returned to the colony, it was my great-granddaughter's 3rd birthday. After such an ordeal, I was excited to be reunited with my family.
But the happy reunion was not to be.
When I reached the island, I found the entire settlement deserted and all of the lodging disassembled. Where did they go? All we found were the words Croatoan carved in the village fence. There were no signs that anyone had lived there for a very long time.
Where did my great-granddaughter go? Or was it...
Before I left, we had a lot of trouble with the natives. We first came to the island to join a previous Roanoke colony. Unfortunately, all we found at that colony were human skeletons, and evidence of a struggle with the natives. However, before I left, I told the remaining colonists to mark a cross somewhere in the village if they were forced to leave the island. After scouring the abandoned village, I found no cross and no messages besides the Croatoan.
Croatoans!
Hello, and welcome back to Unsolved Histories. You recently heard a story about John White and his travels to the New World, as well as the supposed troubles between Roanoke and the Croatoans. Speaking of Croatoans, they are definitely the hot topic this evening, considering the high ratings. Scratch that. The death of Edgar Allan Poe just smashed that record from here to the sea of poor Annabelle Lee.
I sure hope the temperance movement can survive after his death. His writings were always very crude, but filled with life and meaning, especially that one about the black cat. If you always wondered how this brilliant writer specifically died, you'll enjoy this next segment.
Poe once said, "The boundaries which divide life from death are at best shadowy and vague." This is especially true for himself. For over 150 years, Poe's death has been shrouded in confusion and speculation.
Edgar was coming up to New York to bring me back to Richmond for his wedding. I was just so excited to see him happy again and couldn't wait to meet his fiancée. Edgar had fallen into melancholy after the death of my daughter, and it was so nice to see another woman lift up his spirits. I became very worried when I didn't hear from him for a week after leaving Richmond.
Poe was found in Baltimore on October 3rd, 1849, and taken in by his friend, Joseph Snodgrass.
A man by the name of Walker wrote to me, saying that he found my friend Edgar in a gutter near Ryan's Polls. The note said he appeared to be in great distress. and in need of immediate assistance. Naturally, I hurried to meet with this Mr. Walker and found my dear friend in a terrible state. His hair was unkempt, his eyes dull, and his ill-fitting clothes reeked as if they'd been worn for days. All this was wholly uncharacteristic for a man who prided himself on his appearance. It seemed to me and his physician, Dr. Moran, that Poe was intoxicated. He always had a weak tolerance for liquor.
Poe's aunt and many others disagree with this theory.
It's true that Edgar was very sensitive to alcohol and had fallen under its spell many times before, but he hadn't had a drink for months. He even became an avid member of the temperance movement. I'm certain he wouldn't have had a drink unless someone forced it down his throat.
So what happened to Edgar in those 5 days? What troubles befell him? And how on earth did he end up in Baltimore when he was supposed to be in New York?
Some other men thought Edgar may have been attacked during his trip and dumped in Baltimore by his attackers. A few friends said they saw Poe at an inn. Someone was apparently very offended by something Edgar said. No idea. And the man she was with decided to teach him a lesson. Edgar was always very admiring of women, and I can understand how that admiration could be misconstrued.
Still others believe Poe was a victim of political exploitation and voter fraud.
Well, I'm told it was an election day in Baltimore, and those politicians, you know how they can be, would kidnap men and force them to vote all around the state. Cooping, that's what it is. That's the only explanation. There's no way Edgar would have delayed his trip unless he'd been forced to.
The world may never know what happened to Poe in those 5 days.
Welcome back to Unsolved Histories, where we uncover the mysteries of our distilleries.
Speaking of distilleries, Edgar Allan Poe had a huge problem with drinking, as covered before. I'm positive he would be putting money towards any new liquor manufacturer in town.
On to our third and final mystery of the night, the trial of Lizzie Borden. Although she may sound a tad bit boring, she is filled with the eager thirst for her parents' blood.
You know what they say, Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41.
Or did she?
On August 4th, 1892, Andrew Borden and his wife, Abby, were brutally murdered in their
I
home.
was in the barn all morning looking for fishing supplies. My father and I were planning on going on a fishing trip later that month. When I came back into the house, I found his bloody body in the living room. When I screamed, our maid Bridget ran into the house and I immediately sent for the police. But it didn't stop there. When I went upstairs, I found my dear stepmother had been murdered as well. I just couldn't think of who could have done something so terrible. My father made a lot of enemies in town. He was a very good, honest businessman, but many people were jealous of his wealth. All my life I've been worried that one of these enemies would turn violent, and finally they had. Besides his business opponents, my father also employed many laborers. Often they came to the house for their pay, which my father never gave because wages were distributed at the office. Maybe one of these laborers became violent when my father denied him his wages. I do recall seeing a man come to the door that morning.
After investigating all of Andrew's employees, servants, business adversaries, and business partners, the police chose to arrest Lizzie, Andrew's youngest daughter, for the 2 murders.
Arrested me. To think that I could bring myself to do something so terrible, and to my parents no less. The detectives and the lawyers kept telling me that I was always changing my story. It's not my fault that I made some mistakes the first time they talked to me. I just found the bodies and just lost both of my parents. They said that my father abused me and that's why I killed him. That's simply not true. My father was certainly tight with his wallet, and we didn't enjoy many luxuries, which was certainly frustrating. but that's no reason to take up the hatchet with them.
While in jail awaiting trial, Lizzie's case gained national attention through the newspapers. By the time the trial rolled around, she had an entire country's support and judgment.
They held me in jail for 9 months before the trial even began. By the time we got to court, I was so tired and distressed, I just wanted to go home. The prosecution was simply ruthless the whole time. They said I hated my stepmother because my father gave her a house, and that the two of us never spoke. They said my sister Emma and I went away for the summer to get away from our parents. The worst part of it all was when that terrible lawyer brought the skulls of my departed parents into court. I was so overcome with anger and sorrow that I fainted. Thankfully, the good men of the jury found me innocent, and my whole ordeal ended. Much to my dismay, however, they never found the true murderer, and my name continues to be tarnished. But I'm innocent.
Apparently Lizzie Borden came back and took our main host on a little bloody vacation. Hopefully he will be back in time in order to see the return of the Roanoke colony. Maybe he can say hello to Edgar Allan Poe, who shows how we all have woes. Thank you, and stay tuned for next week's installment of Unsolved Histories.